นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. This windy, wet weather that's been going on for a while now made me think of Lumpur Sangwan, who used to live in what Tung Samaki Tham in Suphanburi, Thailand. He was a monk, very well practiced monk, considered to be an arahant, and he was a friend of Ajahn Chah. When he came to build his monastery, he built his main meditation hall in the shape of an ocean liner with a pointy bow or stern, I can't remember, the pointy bit at the front and then a round bit at the back. So if you looked at the hall from the side, it looked like a ship. He said this is the most important meditation, the most important building in the monastery, because it's where people practice meditation. And he was a very tough monk, and he would lead people in meditating sometimes all day, sometimes all night. He himself could sit for many hours without moving, which is how it is when somebody no longer has attachment. Then they're not too bothered by pain or discomfort. So I was just thinking, our meditation hall is also a very important building, and if it keeps raining, maybe it will turn into a ship and be where we can stay safe from the rain. So today is Asalha Puja. Asalha is the name of the full moon. It's full moon day, even though you can't see it because there's too much cloud. Puja means worship or homage. So it's an occasion we come together to pay homage to Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha with our practice. So we have this word Patipati Puja. Patipati means the practice. Sila, Samadhi, Panya, the Buddha's pathway to enlightenment. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves of the Buddha and his life and the Dhamma, what he taught, and the Sangha, those enlightened beings who followed the way of practice, just to set our minds in the right direction, give us faith, confidence that this way of practice works for human beings who are interested to be free from stress and suffering. Because this day, the Asalha Puja, is the full moon day, usually in July, falls in the rainy season, the day before the Sangha enter the 3-month rains retreat, time where the weather is not the best for travel, so it's a good time to go on retreat. But it's the day we remember the first teaching of the Buddha, which we just chanted, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. After the Buddha was enlightened in May, on that full moon we know as Visakha, he sat under the Bodhi tree, enjoying the peace and happiness of his enlightenment, as you would. Nothing else to do, different from ordinary people who are always thinking, what have I got to do next? Where have I got to do? What have I got to do? And probably already tonight you've been thinking what you're going to do tomorrow, what you're going to do next week, what plans do you have for next year. All that kind of normal way of thinking. The enlightened one doesn't have that anymore. Their mind is completely free. Doesn't mean to say a Buddha can't think or plan. He probably would have thoughts about different things, but not in the normal way where you're kind of just a slave to your thoughts, pulling you around all over the place, making you stressed after a while. He didn't have any of that. So he's just sitting very peacefully under the Bodhi tree with nothing else to do. And he even considered, well, I've freed my mind from all forms of suffering. As we just chanted, no more birth for me, no more suffering for me. He could have just sat there, enjoyed it until the body got old and sick and died, and we wouldn't be here today. But the Buddha had previously made a great aspiration to attain enlightenment or free himself from suffering for the benefit of everyone else, not just for himself. So through the power of that wish that he'd had for so many lifetimes previously, he was stimulated to go out and teach the Dhamma. The way it is for Buddhist monks, we're not allowed to teach unless invited. So even the Buddha had to be invited. So they say the great God, Brahma Sahampati, came and invited the Buddha to teach for the benefit of everyone, to teach the Dhamma, the way out of suffering, teach people how to live their lives well, skillfully, how to improve themselves, and ultimately how to reach Nibbana. Brahma Sahampati invited the Buddha to teach, just as Peter invited me to teach just now, using the same words, Brahma Chaloka. And that's become a tradition, to invite teaching of the Dhamma. It's actually a rule for Buddhist monks. We can't teach unless we're invited. We can't go and knock on doorsteps and bother people, telling them the good word of the Dhamma unless they want it. We're not like travelling salesmen, sticking foot in the door, trying to get the Dhamma into someone's house. But the Buddha was invited to teach, and then he thought, well, who's suitable to teach? And he thought of his own teachers before he was Buddha, because he still had gratitude to his first meditation teachers, even though they weren't enlightened and he had become enlightened. So you could say, well, he's superior to his own teachers, wiser, more peaceful, more knowledgeable. He had something that they didn't have. But still, out of gratitude, he thought, maybe I can share what I know with them. But because of his great ability with the mind, psychic ability, he set his mind on his teachers, thinking of them, and realised, oh, they've both passed away. They've now themselves become Brahma gods because they had attained great states of samadhi, jhana, before they died. So they're reborn in a very good place, but unable to come and receive teachings. So then he thought of his thought of his 5 friends, 5 ascetics who he'd been practicing with previously, practicing what we call the ascetic practices, fasting, going without sleep, pushing the body in many different ways, holding the breath, all kinds of different practices that people thought in those days might lead to enlightenment. He'd been practicing with them for many years. And he knew that they were good people with many skills, you might say expert meditators for the time, but not yet enlightened, still lacking something, missing something in their approach, something in the way they practiced. So he thought, well, maybe I can help them. They're ready, they're skilled in their meditation. It won't take much for them to understand the Dhamma. So he walked from Bodh Gaya, the Bodhi tree, all the way to Sarnath, the deer park, Benares. It took a while, and quite possibly he taught people a little bit on the way. Nevertheless, that's not really recorded, so the first real record of his teaching is this Dhammacakka Sutta he gave when he arrived at the place, the deer park, where his 5 friends were living and practicing. And they couldn't resist the Buddha, who was now very peaceful, wise, enlightened, must have had a great presence, peaceful presence. They had actually turned away from him originally when he left them, started eating again after fasting for a long time. They thought he'd given up and lost his way, so they kind of gave up on him. But now he was enlightened out of gratitude and kindness, compassion. He thought of them and he went back to them. And at first they weren't going to receive him in the traditional way that monks do. They receive a teacher, wash his feet, set down a seat for him. But when the Buddha arrived, he told them not to call him in the usual not to address him in the usual way. Previously, they'd called him friend. Obviously, he still was their friend, but he said, "No, call me Buddha," because he's now fully enlightened Buddha, fully self-enlightened Buddha. Which made them think, you don't go to visit your old friends and tell them, "Don't call me friend, call me Buddha." You don't do that lightly. Something is different. The Buddha is now fully enlightened. So he said, "Call me Buddha," which made them kind of stop and think, oh, maybe something has happened, maybe he knows something. So then they were ready to listen to him, and he started teaching the Dhammacakka Sutta, as we've just chanted, explaining the Four Noble Truths and the way of practice out of suffering. And there's different aspects of that sutta you can contemplate, use in your practice. One that I always find helpful is the way the Buddha said, as we chant, Chakku Udapadi, Jnanang Udapadi, Vicha Udapadi, Aloko Udapadi. Having heard the Dhamma, the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, light arose, vision arose, true knowledge and vision arose, insight arose in the minds of the listener, which is the value of Dhamma. That's why giving of Dhamma is the greatest gift you can give to another person. Advice, teachings that will help them to gain understanding and knowledge that will free them from suffering. Give them the way out of suffering, lighten up, brighten up their minds. Nothing better to give to another person than that. So he gave this teaching, explaining things, and because they were already expert meditators, peaceful, wise, they already understood about sila, morality. They're already practicing very well, just needed a slight adjustment in their way of thinking, which the Buddha could give them, slightly new insight, new angle. And he explained very well, very clearly, the Four Noble Truths. What is suffering? What is its cause? Craving and attachment. Talked about the end of suffering, or the cessation of suffering, and then the path of practice. Noble Eightfold Path, he explained that is the path that leads to the end of suffering. By removing craving and attachment from your mind, you can reach the cessation of suffering. He explained that, and because these monks were already very peaceful, wise, it made sense. Only one monk at first gained what we call the Dhamma eye, this true insight, and had this sort of enlightening experience, at least attained the first level of enlightenment. Venerable Kalyano understood, and the Buddha said, Kalyano knows, Kalyano understands. Everything is impermanent. Everything that is subject to arising is subject to cessation. It's a teaching on impermanence, because for most people that's something that we can see and understand quite quickly, and especially somebody who's meditated, developed a lot of skill in calming their mind, reflecting on things, observing things. And Venerable Kalyano could really see it for himself. The nature of existence is bound up with impermanence. Your physical body is impermanent. Everyone is subject to birth, aging, sickness, death. A human being, a human life doesn't last forever. It's necessarily limited by the physical body, which won't last forever. But then even the mind is constantly changing. You don't just have one thought, one emotion, one feeling in your mind all the time. Our mental activity is constantly changing, or is impermanent. Venerable Kalyano saw that clearly. Listening to the Buddha teach, for him it must have made clear sense, and a sense of attachment to the body and the mind as a self-identity, what we call Sakkaya Ditthi, the first of the fetters, dropped away. So there's a real change in his view, the way he looked at the world. And the Buddha knew that he'd understood. And even the Devas, they say, celebrated as light arose in the mind of Venerable Kalyano. Then the Devas all celebrated, because the light of enlightenment, the radiance of the peaceful mind, not just the radiance of samadhi, but the radiance of insight, is something very special. And later on, another week or two later, when they all these first 5 students of the Buddha became fully enlightened, became arahants. The light that arose in their hearts, they say, was boundless, limitless. The enlightened mind is without limit. There's nothing left in terms of attachment, clinging. And the mind reflects that because it's been purified from attachment and clinging, so the mind becomes totally radiant. That radiance without limits, so it spreads throughout the universe, and all the devas and brahmas celebrated. So this night, Asalha Puja, in the history of Buddhism, is a very special night. It's a time when the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha become complete for the first time. Once you have Venerable Kalyano gaining the Dhamma eye, reaching the first stage of enlightenment, then that Sangha, that's the arising of the noble Sangha. And the reason he gained the Dhamma eye is because he was listening to the Dhamma as taught by the Buddha, explaining the truth, 4 noble truths. So we say the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the 3 refuges, became complete on this occasion. Which means the Dhamma that the Buddha taught on this occasion was effective, was well proclaimed, well expounded, good quality, meaningful, and it worked to help Venerable Kalyano, who was not enlightened, become enlightened. And that's the most important thing about the Dhamma, it's got to work. Otherwise, what's the point? So the Buddha gave his talk, Venerable Kalyano becomes a stream winner, first stage of enlightenment. It's like saying, oh, what the Buddha is teaching works. It changes a human mind from unenlightened to enlightened. So the 3 refuges of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha arose in the world on that occasion and have not disappeared since then. And that's our good fortune. We're lucky. Why are we lucky? Because the Dhamma is still in the world to practice, to hear, to practice. The Buddha himself is no longer with us, but the Sangha is, and the Dhamma is, the teachings and the knowledge, the qualities that make someone enlightened like a Buddha is still around. That's our good fortune. Maybe one day in the future there'll be no more Buddhist teachings, no more Buddha Dhamma Sangha left in the world. But we haven't reached that point yet. The Dhamma is still here for us to practice. But our concern probably should be, are we practicing or not? As I said earlier, tonight is a night for Patipati Puja, practicing in homage or in worship of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. And it's the best way to repay the compassion of the Buddha is by practicing what he taught. Bringing your own mind to realize the Dhamma, realize the truth. You know, when we practice in the beginning, we listen to the teachings, we read the books, we hear the talks, and that's important. Gives us some understanding that helps us to know what we're doing and how to practice. But it's not enough. It's just a start. Then we have to take what the Buddha taught and bring it inwards into our own hearts and minds, internalize it, and actually observe and learn and see for ourselves what the Buddha was talking about, say with the 4 noble truths, to actually observe, well, what is suffering? And where does it come from? What is the cause of suffering? Craving, attachment, where does that come from? How does that arise? And we've done this already for a certain amount in our life. Like everyone would probably agree, oh yeah, I've had suffering, I've had dukkha before, I've had suffering, I've had stress, I've felt pain, I've felt all kinds of different kinds of unpleasant experiences perhaps. Everyone can say that, but to have really known dukkha as dukkha requires a bit more than just remembering that once upon a time I was annoyed with something, or I felt disappointed with something and experienced stress, or I had some worries about something. As I said, we've all had that, but it's fairly vague, isn't it? When you say I'm stressed, what does stress mean? It means thinking in a certain way, accompanied maybe by unpleasant feelings in your body, in your mind. Maybe a sense of uncontrollable thoughts. When you're stressed, you think a lot. Think. Whether you're worried, you're angry, or whether there's something you want that you haven't got. You just think. It's part of what stress does, and all that thinking tires us out, burns us out. And much of the time it's not extreme. You don't have extreme feelings with all that stressful thinking. It's just, but it's agitating, isn't it? And the mind is not still, it's not at ease. So all the Buddha's teachings are giving us ways to deal with that. That's why there's so much emphasis on developing mindfulness, clear comprehension, putting effort into this. Because as you cultivate the quality of mindfulness, you're learning to steady your own mind, quieten it down. So you can see what's going on. You can see the stress more clearly as it comes up. You can know, oh, here comes another train of thought or another feeling. You can actually know it when you're more mindful because you're paying attention. When we're not very mindful, we're not paying attention, we just get lost in our moods and emotions. And stress is like that, isn't it? When we're stressed, we are not happy and we tend to just run with it and get lost in it. So the Buddha encouraged us to practice all kinds of methods and ways to bring up more self-control, composure, mindfulness, so we can observe more clearly. So like tonight, we've been sitting here meditating before this, been practicing mindfulness. It's what allows you to sit still for long periods of time. If you had no mindfulness, and we sometimes say that, don't we? We say, oh, I'm not very mindful. But if you can sit still, like we are sitting still now, that means you have mindfulness. You're able to pay attention, you're able to train your mind to become aware of your posture, and even though you have different thoughts arising, you're not following them very much. You might have had the thought, oh, I can't stand sitting here anymore, I'm going to get up and go away. But you didn't follow it. You may have sleepiness come into your mind, but you're still here, you're still awake. You didn't go to bed. You have all kinds of thoughts come into your mind, but you have enough mindfulness to see them and not follow them. So already we've been developing this Buddhist path for the end of suffering. But we also need to develop a bit more insight. Need to be able to see more clearly the way these stressful thoughts are just stressful thoughts. They just arise, pass away. That's what they do. To know that from moment to moment, to see that. The thoughts, the feelings, you may feel some pain in your body, some restlessness, agitation. To be able to know that and see that as just what we call sankharas. Physical, mental conditions arising, ceasing. We need to practice establishing mindfulness, observing, watching, and learning from our experience. But the result is, when you understand that these things are impermanent, then you can let go, because you know they just pass away, that's their nature. You don't have to let those thoughts bother you too much. They're just thoughts. The worries, the fears, the anxiety, the cravings, the desires, they're just thoughts. They come, they go. That's why practicing late into the night, like on a night like tonight, is so useful. You have an opportunity to really observe your own mind. All kinds of agitating thoughts, desires, wants, things you like, things you don't. You may go through different moods through one night. There'll be periods where you feel inspired. You say, oh, the Buddhist teachings are the best in the world. I want to become a monk. I want to become a nun. I want to leave home, do it. I'm really going to do it. And then an hour later, it can be painful, you're tired, you're sleepy, and you want to give up, you're fed up. Then you keep practicing mindfulness for a bit longer, and that mood passes, then you feel just normal. In one night, you can see a whole range of different emotions, can't you? Bored, excited, interested, some pain, some aversion to the pain. Pain disappears, feel good. Faith comes up, faith disappears. Feel energetic, feel tired. In one night, you can think and feel so many different things. But maybe there's something that's more constant, and that's your mind that's watching and learning, using the various techniques the Buddha gave us. Maybe you just have some particular thought or problem bothering you in your life. It comes up. There's this person you don't like, you don't get on with, and you keep thinking about them. Why do they bother me? Why do I have this problem? But then, establishing mindfulness many times, you realize actually it's just a thought you're carrying around, clinging onto. You know, say there really is a person in your life who causes you some grief, some trouble. They may be miles away, they're not here, but you're carrying them around in your mind. You may have a moment, one of these moments of insight, where you say, oh, this is just a perception, a thought, a memory I'm clinging onto. I really don't need to do this, I can let them go, because it's just a thought. And you let go and your mind becomes brighter at that moment. It may be just a small moment of letting go, but these small moments add up, little by little, and become something more powerful. And they gradually help you to clean up your own mind. Maybe you're upset with yourself. Maybe you're just disappointed with yourself. Something you wanted to do and you didn't do it. Something you did that was wrong or unsuccessful. Maybe you're unhappy about everything. Depends who you are. Some people are just unhappy about everything. Myself, other people, the world, it's all wrong, all bad. But still, it's just a feeling, isn't it? It's just a feeling, oh, okay, now I know what it feels like to have the thought, everybody is wrong, the world is wrong, I hate the world. Even if you have that thought, it's just a thought, isn't it? It's a feeling, a thought, rises, passes away. Or maybe you have the opposite. You love the whole world. Everyone is good. Doesn't matter. Maybe something in between. Love and hate kind of move around all the time in our mind. One day you love them, next day you hate them, next day you love them. Whether it's people or places or work or food or anything. The whole point is you're observing the way your mind works, using the teachings the Buddha gave us. And hopefully, little by little, small success by small success, you can become a little bit wiser. Each time there's this wisdom or this insight arises, then it's like light arising. Light arose, vision arose, knowledge arose, peace arose. With the light of wisdom, the insight, then you get peace. There's nothing like the peace of wisdom. Meditators often talk a lot about samadhi. I've got to get jhana, I've got to get samadhi, and samadhi is necessary. It's part of the practice, but it's not the goal. The goal is this insight, wisdom that sees what you need to let go of, what you're clinging onto, and then letting go. That's where real peace comes from. Every time you let go of something with insight, with understanding, and that changes you for the better. Your mind becomes a little clearer, more peaceful, more happy. Even the Buddha gave the Dhammacakka Sutta, the first 5 students of the Buddha, they didn't all get it immediately. They must have got something from it, but it didn't completely change their mind, except for Kondanya. Kondanya had the real clarity, everything arises, must pass away. For him, he had his insight. Even Kondanya wasn't yet fully enlightened, but he had that insight which changed, put his mind beyond doubt, helped him see, this body is impermanent. You can't keep it forever, so therefore it's not worth clinging to, because it doesn't last. You see, if you see the impermanence in your body, it means you can accept the fact, one day I've got to die, one day the people I love will die, the things of this world I won't be able to take with me because they're impermanent. For Kondanya, he could see that. He knew that without a doubt, without any fuzziness, without any kind of fumbling around. Maybe it's true, maybe not. When we don't have insight, what's it like? You're always kind of hoping for the best. Maybe I won't die. Maybe I'll live forever after all. That's how we human beings operate. Assume that you won't die, or certainly won't die today. But who knows when it will happen? Everyone must die. Or perhaps more frequently is, I should be able to get by, I'm never going to get ill, I shouldn't get ill, I don't deserve to get ill. But as we can hear tonight, many people are ill, coughs and colds everywhere. It's not surprising with this weather. We get ill, but when you get ill, if you haven't investigated the impermanence of your body, what do? You say, why me? We start moaning, complaining, feeling sorry for ourselves. I'm ill, this shouldn't happen, it's not fair, life's not fair, why me? Or blaming someone, blame the doctor, blame somebody, if we got ill that somebody else gave us the illness, we say, it's their fault, I caught my cold from them. Or blame the medicine, I got the medicine, it didn't work, waste of money. That's partly the non-acceptance of impermanence, isn't it? Instead of going, illness is just part of having a body, because bodies are impermanent. We complain, we blame, we complain, we go into negativity. Old age the same, get older, you get more aches and pains, things wear out. Body doesn't work as well as it used to, doesn't look like it used to, doesn't look so good. Everything becomes more of a more of a problem when you get old. So you're not happy because you're not accepting impermanence. And we fight against it. We even use the word fight. I'm going to fight old age. I'm going to be running marathons till I'm 100. I'm going to get all the cosmetic surgery and look 20 when I'm 80. Nowadays, we have a lot of techniques, a lot of things to help us. Hair dye. Maybe that could be your liberating moment. You stop dyeing your hair when you get older. People who dye their hair, they want to stay with a nice young-looking hair. This is something we have to keep investigating, but this is what Kalyano understood on that night. Asalha Puja. He's not going to be dyeing his hair. He knows hair is impermanent, body is impermanent. They say when Kalyano got enlightened after the Vasa, after the rains retreat, he went off into the forest. He'd done his bit. He became the first person to prove that the Buddhist teachings work. First Sangha, first living Sangha in the world. Then he went off to the Himalayas and meditated peacefully, and we don't know much about what happened to him after that. He was just peacefully enlightened in the Himalayas. For those who are enlightened, they have different characters, don't they? Someone like Ajahn Kalyano got enlightened and spent the rest of his days teaching, like the Buddha. Very skilled, good teacher, passing on the Dhamma to his students. Some people become enlightened, just go off, have a more secluded time, quiet time. Depends on the character of each individual. The important point is the Dhamma works. Hearing the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma, brings you from a place of unenlightened suffering and stress to a place of happiness and peace, and takes you beyond stress. That's the point. So we're celebrating that tonight, and in a moment we'll have a circumambulation. Maybe because of the rain we'll have to stay on the veranda tonight. But we carry our candles, our electric candles, around the hall, remembering the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, chanting Iti Piso Bhagawa in praise of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. That's how we practice, and then the rest of the night we'll have the chance to meditate, sitting, walking meditation in here. At midnight we'll be chanting the Paritas. Wake everybody up if you're sleepy. We're giving ourselves to the practice of the Dhamma for a night. So I'll leave the talk there.